Lesson 58, Part 2. Topic: the presence of spiritual entities in the places of the physical dimension where you are. Sometimes, when these places have a high concentration of psychic energy and many spiritual entities, if this is combined with a human being who also possesses a high level of psychic energy and is highly receptive to the spiritual world, this accumulated psychic energy can be amplified even further. Between the spiritual entities and the human being sensitive to this type of energy, many manifestations can occur. This isn't dangerous if it is kept under control, considering the type of human activity that is sensitive to this energy. It also depends on the intentions of the spiritual entities present. If they are overly anxious to communicate, they can create a significant imbalance, potentially rendering the place uninhabitable, because they cannot make themselves understood calmly and accessibly by the inhabitants. If most of the spiritual entities inhabiting a place are negative, the consequences can be dire. If this is combined with a human being who is receptive to this energy, the place can almost certainly become uninhabitable, and there could be even a risk of death for the inhabitants. Even the mere presence of negative spiritual entities combined with amplified psychic energy can have very harmful effects, rendering a house uninhabitable. If the human factor is also involved, the consequences can be destructive for all the surrounding houses, and a large part of the area can become uninhabitable. Fortunately, this doesn't usually happen, because the psychic energy, once accumulated in one place, is usually restricted to that specific location. Outside of that magnetic anomaly and that place, it cannot last for very long. Furthermore, the psychic energy a person possesses is generally limited. Therefore, it cannot be drawn from that person, nor can it manifest itself too far. That is why houses affected by some kind of enchantment, as you say, tend to be quite specific. It's not usually a large area, and if it is a large area, what's happening is that the telluric zone with magnetic anomalies is usually very extensive, and so is this psychic energy grows, and the affected area slowly expands. As you can see, it all depends on the extent of the magnetic anomaly zone and the telluric energy that accompanies it. This is the determining factor in the size of the affected area. Now we move on to how to cleanse an area affected by a spell. If the area has positive energy, it won't be a problem for any of the house's inhabitants. There might be some slightly annoying side effects, such as objects being moved, but these won't harm the residents. The atmosphere will be positive. The only potential drawback is that the energy in the house might become so intense because there are many spiritual entities present, as the places are very attractive. This activity could be almost constant, which might be boresome for some inhabitants. That's the only downside to these places, which have a lot of positive energy. If you want to cleanse the place, I don't recommend it, because living in these places is very beneficial. In any case, if you want the energy to calm down, what you need to do is have the mental capacity to communicate with these spiritual entities and ask them to please calm down, to reduce their activity, because we are all human and we can't tolerate so much noise and activity. Over time, if they are good people, which they usually are, they will eventually listen and the activity should subside. It shouldn't take many communication sessions with the spiritual entities. If you do it in a group, I'm referring to a group of communicating with spiritual entities, whether through a Ouija board, automatic writing, or any other means, communication will be easier. But be careful with the group you choose, because it has to be people with very clear minds who don't experience mood swings, who aren't easily overwhelmed by the large amount of energy, and who don't lose control. It can help with the cleansing if you can invoke a help of a spiritual entity called the spiritual master, either yours, the group's, or someone else's in the house. You can ask for their advice and help to cleanse the space for you. You can also assist in this task. Of course, you can ask the spiritual entities to calm their activity. This spiritual entity, acting as a master for someone in the group, will be responsible for bringing order to the space, controlling the other spiritual entities. This spiritual entity acting as a master is generally not alone. They are accompanied by another group of spiritual entities, their team, who typically handle this type of work. Getting the spiritual master to appear, establish good communication, and plan a method of cleansing the space in just a few sessions isn't always easy. It all depends on the nature of the place and the spiritual intentions that inhabit it. Some may be positive, but there's usually at least one spirit with mocking intentions, depending on the location. These spirits aren't entirely positive. They want to deceive the inhabitants of the house, annoy them, and anger them so they can feed on those negative feelings. They are generally few in number because if positive entities abound, they would drive these mocking spirits out. However, they usually return periodically. This is because the entities responsible for guardianship aren't always watching or maintaining a tight security perimeter. They have many tasks to perform elsewhere. They have always many jobs to do. So end of lesson 58, part 2.